And I can't tell you how delighted I am to welcome you to the first LBC Book Club Hour. We'll be doing this every Monday night between 9 and 10, talking to some of the country's top authors, but in the absence of them today, we're going to be talking to...
I was wondering when the knife is coming out.
We're going to be talking to Olly Mann and Helen Zaltzman, because they are publishing a book. Well, actually, I lie, Faber and Faber at publishing the book.
Proper publishing.
Proper publishing.
No Harold Pinter anymore, we're filling the gap.
But they have this book called Answer Me This, which is coming out on Thursday. They very kindly invited me to the party, the launch party, knowing full well that I can't come because I will be on radio at the time.
That's a good point, yeah.
There isn't even a party, Ian.
I don't get to go to any book launches anymore. Now, let me just tell you what some of the publicity blurb on the book says, because it's actually quite good at describing it. Normally, publicity blurbs for books don't really tell you anything about the book, but this is actually very good. It's featuring all-time favourite questions from the award-winning comedy podcast Answer Me This. This book contains the answers to all the questions you never knew you wanted to ask. Now, I said earlier, it's a bit like James O'Brien's Mystery Hour.
Yes.
It's sort of
I wouldn't admit that in the court of
steroids.
law, but, you know, there's some similarities there, just as Ask Rod Gilbert may have something in debt to us. Who knows?
Well, I wonder who was there first. Now, as hosts of Answer Me This, Helen and Olly take on the world's questions and solve them with their unique mixture of pointless knowledge, reckless opinion, and a dash of filth. We'll have a little dash of filth tonight, but nothing too heavy, if you don't mind.
We'll restrain ourselves. Ollie's grandma's listening.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a good point.
Well, recorded in a living room in a remote London suburb, the podcast is downloaded 3 million times a year by listeners across the globe. Since the show began in January 2007, Helen and Olly have dealt with more than 1,500 diverse and fantastical inquiries. Didn't know fantastical was a word, but it obviously is in the world of book PR. And you've actually won lots of awards, haven't you? You won a 2010 Sony Radio Academy Award for Best Internet. Actually, you didn't. You came second.
That's a win.
That still kept. No one says, "Oh, I won a bronze Olympic medal."
It says here you won a Sony.
We did.
You came second, and I know because I was on the judging panel for it.
We won we were quite open about it.
We won a silver.
We won a silver Sony Radio. You're not going to put silver on the press release, are you?
Oh, I think it's just exaggerating a little bit. Anyway, what I want to do is to just go through one or two of the things in the book. But I'd love LBC listeners to phone in with questions which you can't answer.
Uh-oh.
Now, if we go through just one or two of the questions that are in the book, why is Boxing Day called Boxing Day?
Yep.
Do you remember the answer?
I do remember the answer. The funny answer is that it should be called Boxing Day because families fight over the remote control.
Yeah.
The real answer is, it should be called Boxes Day, because it originates from a tradition of rich families giving their servants presents the day after Christmas. Presumably they actually needed them to cut up the turkey and welcome everyone into their house on Christmas Day. But then on Boxing Day they used to collect for charity and give them boxes of presents, hence Boxing Day.
And they used to wait on the servants in a single-day reversal of
is that
roles.
right?
Yeah.
That's that thing. It's like when people have slave days at private schools, isn't it? They're like, oh, this is fun. We'll all pretend to be servants. It's a little bit rubbing it in their faces, I think, isn't it? On the one day you give them a day off.
Now, we've got another one here. This is for you, Helen.
Ooh.
I can't think of any gay hosts or gay ghosts.
I was going to say, it's not too difficult.
Freudian slip there.
On LBC.
I can't think of any gay ghosts or black ghosts. Is the spirit world homophobic and racist?
Well, I think it's rather hard to tell the skin colour of a ghost because they're transparent and they're often covered in a winding sheet, or, you know, they've got a ghostly pallor. So it's very hard to tell. And also, this is a question from a man in Colchester, and I should imagine that the British ghostly world is largely monochrome due to the population of Britain not being multi-ethnic until relatively recently.
Attitudes die slowly amongst the undead, I think it's fair to say.
And how do you tell what sexuality a ghost is anyway?
Well,
They're usually just drifting around hallways, they're not exhibiting their sexual behaviour.
That's right, and they all say woo, they all wear ruffs, and if they're being channeled by Derek Okora, then they all sound gay.
They wear what?
Ruffs.
What's a ruff?
You know, like a sort of 18th century neck.
It's more kind of Elizabethan.
Never heard of that word before, but
Really?
then I do come from Essex. What?
A fantastical ruff. We should get you one for Christmas.
I think you should. I really think you should.
They're due a comeback 400 years out the limelight.
Well, you're doing very well, because normally when you ask an author a question about something in their book, they can never remember it
Because
at
they
all.
normally haven't written it.
But it shows that you have actually written
We've
this
actually
book.
written this book, yeah.
Right, here's another one for you, Olly. Why do people throw bottles at ships on their maiden voyage?
Oh. I don't know if, having just said that, I'm not sure I can. I remember the funny answer.
Go on, we'll cope with that.
It's that a lot of tramps sleep on piers. But that's not the real answer, and I can't remember the real answer. Do you remember, Helen?
It was something like they used to sacrifice a goat, and I think this is the ancient Greeks, and they used to smear the ship's prow with its blood.
Yes.
To kind of entrust. Somehow that would ward off bad spirits and protect the ship from anything bad happening. And then they got into wine instead and thought, yeah, let's save a goat and just sprinkle some wine on.
So is your criteria for including questions in your podcast whether you can think of anything funny to say about them?
Yeah, it's one of the criteria. And we like to have a balance, actually, in each episode of the show. We try and have stuff that is genuine sort of trivia, fact-based stuff people didn't know, and then stuff that lets us talk about anecdotal things that we find amusing. But in the book, it's basically stuff that we could be funny about.
And Helen, what inspired you to start doing the podcast originally?
Well, it was Ollie asking me, do you want to do a podcast? And me not being able to think immediately of any objection to the plan, not really knowing what one was particularly, or what a massive drain it would be on the next 4 years of my life.
Yeah, and the reason that we could never go to anyone's party, a bit like you not being able to come to our book launch, we haven't been able to go to any friends' parties because we record on a Saturday or Sunday very often. So it's been a big block. But...
Okay, well,
a really good hobby.
As Helen couldn't come up with the reason for starting the podcast, you came up with the idea. Why?
Well, we kind of always wanted to get onto the radio, really, and we always wanted to publish stuff. And Helen and I had done some student radio when we'd met at university, and I just kind of realised that, a lot of radio stations were losing personality all the time at the very same time that the internet was coming along and giving you a forum to be able to say whatever you like. There's no regulation. If it works, and you build up an audience, and if it doesn't, it's just an experiment and there's no pressure. And we were going, without a sponsor or an advertiser. We recorded it in Helen's sitting room, where we still record it every week. So it was just an experiment, really.
Yeah, you had a job you hated.
Yeah, thanks.
So did I. And you thought, why not get a hobby?
Yeah, that was kind of it. Yeah.
And how did it? Because it has become a bit of a cult phenomenon, hasn't it?
Yeah. It has.
It's not for us to judge.
It's difficult to say.
Kenneth Williams would say, "Well, you're a cult."
Yes. I suppose the thing is, the format, Answer Me This, is based on people's questions. And so built into the format, we've got this gimmick that people send in a question they want to know each week, whether we've actually answered it, so they're more likely to tune in to find out. And then if they tune in and we have answered it, that's going to give them a little bit of a sense of loyalty and community. And what's really nice is the people that now listen to the show, a lot of them are the same people who started listening 4 years ago when we first started.
And we were rubbish then. So
Yeah.
they really have been through thick and thin.
Indeed.
Well, I must admit, when I heard one of your shows, I thought it was rubbish as well.
Oh, you're so
then
sweet, Ian.
But then I started to get addicted.
Against your will.
Against
How
my
horrible.
will. But it actually, it is great listening. But what on earth gave you the idea of turning it into a book?
Well, actually, that I have to be say. There we are. This is why
It's his
we never
way
got
with words
broadcast
that
jobs.
meant it's such an obvious
This is
decision.
why he didn't get a job in radio, isn't it?
That wasn't directly our idea, though we'd always thought it might work well as a book. That was,
but we're too lazy to do anything about it ourselves.
yeah. No, that was just a chap who we met who's a literary agent who said, I reckon I could sell this as a book. And lo, he did.
Yeah,
it
we
was
thought,
really
I'd like to
true.
see you try.
We were really surprised. We were genuinely shocked, actually, that we got such a prestigious publisher like Faber to get on the back of it. Because, actually, people get our show for free off our website and iTunes. Apart from Carl Pilkington, who's on the Ricky Gervais show, and everyone knows how big that show is because of Ricky Gervais, there's really no litmus paper to see whether podcasters can sell books. And I think a lot of publishers might have actually been scared of the idea that people who listen to our show for free wouldn't be prepared to go to a bookshop and pay £10 for it. So we were very pleasantly surprised when Faber said, "Oh yeah, we think they might," because
I'm looking at this with great interest, because I think, well, if you sell a lot of these, why shouldn't I turn my blog into a book?
You should, but I think a lot of publishers had their fingers burnt when a few years ago there was a huge trend for turning blogs into books, but they didn't change the blogs enough. So if people had already been following the blog, they'd read everything for free. And we tried to make sure that this book was different enough to the podcast by including visual gags.
Yes.
For instance, which you can't really do in audio form. And we went back and wrote things from scratch so that it's not just a transcription of what we said, which
Oh, so
would just be
you did
intolerable.
actually put some effort into the book. That's what you're trying to convince
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Well, I can't listen back to the podcast, so I had to write it from scratch.
Why?
Well, Ian, I don't know how about you, but the sound of my own voice again, once I've edited the thing for several hours a week, I know I never want to hear it again.
Well,
Yeah,
whereas
I feel
Olly-
like that about Helen's voice as well.
Yeah, whereas
reasonable.
Olly, because he loves being on the radio, will
Yeah.
listen back time and time again to every single podcast.
I've got a
Just
wi-
as I do with the show. Every morning,
That's
I
right.
dial up the LBC website, download the podcast, and I'm happy for the rest of the day.
Dude, that's an image. Do you listen in the shower to your own voice?
No.
No.
That
okay.
would be a perverse
That
thing
would be
to do.
absurd. I listen in the car to our podcast, and then I can pretend that it's on proper radio.
But I mean, people do. They do send you questions. You don't just make them up because you think, well, that's a good one.
We couldn't possibly make them up. In fact, we started at the very beginning of the podcast asking each other a question each week, and it petered out after about 7 episodes because we just couldn't think of any.
Yeah, and you just couldn't make up the stuff that we get. And from the places that we get it as well. I mean, being a podcast, this week we had emails from Mongolia.
And Korea,
Yeah.
Rwanda, and a guy who works in a diamond mine in the Arctic.
Yeah, a train driver in Bognor Regis. I know that doesn't sound as exotic compared to the...
But it
diamond
was
mining.
to us, Ian.
Yeah.
Well, let's before we go to the travel, let's ask you one further question from the book, Helen. I'm very interested in this answer
Oh, interesting.
for obvious reasons. What was so wrong with Tunbridge Wells that you had to leave?
I think it's just, I know that you're attached to it, Ian, but I think one often has a reaction of revulsion to the place one grew up in. And so I'd put it down to that. But it does have lovely architecture, apart from the town hall, obviously. as
Apart
you know.
from, yes, but I think that's going.
Yeah, it's been going for a long time, hasn't it? I mean, the cinema's been shut 10 years. What have they done with the building? Nothing. Still there.
Well, they have just sold it to Sainsbury's. Is it Sainsbury's or one of them anyway?
Really?
As if we need another supermarket in Tunbridge Wells. And that was it, really. So that's not.
Apologies to
that's
the Tunbridge
not very-
Wellians.
That's not very exciting.
I've only
that
moved
one.
about 30 odd miles away.
No, but I think that's a very shrewd observation because I feel exactly that about where my parents are from Stanmore in northwest London. There's nothing wrong with it, and in fact, my girlfriend at the moment is talking about we should move out to the suburbs.
My girlfriend at the moment.
No.
Didn't you just
No,
love
no, no,
that?
no.
He has a different girlfriend from 10 till 11 p.m.
To clarify, my girlfriend is talking about moving to the suburbs at the moment.
Oh, I
was
see.
the meaning
right.
of that
That's
at the moment.
Another reason why you don't get on radio.
Incredible syntax.
Well, I was creating some intrigue there, actually, some drama.
What does he mean?
Anyway,
So
she's
many
talking about moving to the suburbs.
interpretations.
We'd never moved to Stanmore, even though there's nothing wrong with it, just because I feel that
Well,
revulsion of having grown up there.
We are talking to the authors of the Answer Me This book, Olly Mann and Helen Zaltzman. They're here for for the rest of the hour until 10 o'clock on the LBC Book Club. If you've got a question for them, 0845 6060 973. You can text us on 84850. You can email ian@lbc.co.uk or tweet me at lbc973. It's 9:16. Time.
Podcasts, go to lbc.co.uk/podcasts.
It's Ian Dale with the LBC Book Hour. We're going to have a book out every Monday night between 9 and 10 o'clock. And with me tonight are Helen Zaltzman and Olly Mann, who've written a book called Answer Me This. And many of you may know that they do a podcast, strangely titled Answer Me This.
Where do we get our ideas from?
I
Bizarre
think
cosmic
you get them from James O'Brien, to be honest, because it's essentially his mystery hour, sort of writ large.
To be fair, he does have claim to having come up with the idea of a question and answer radio show before Answer Me This started, but we genuinely hadn't heard it. And then a couple of times we did have people say, oh, they asked that on James O'Brien's Mystery Hour.
See, James has missed out on. He could have done this, couldn't he?
He could have had a book out. I don't know, actually, though, because he answers... to be fair to him, he does answer the questions properly and answer sort of half-jokey.
Yeah, he's
So I
paid
don't
to
know.
answer them, though, and we're not. That's the difference.
Yet, but I mean, how many people download your podcast every week?
About 50,000.
You see, 50,000. If you're not making money out of that, why on earth not?
Well, I suppose we're doing sort of spin-off projects like this, but you've got to be careful, I guess, when you build up an audience from scratch from your sitting room who like you because
No
you're
one else is
independent
intervening.
and, yeah, there's no sponsor. I mean, I think it has got to the stage now where we probably could brand it with advertising, but we'd just be really careful about who we chose to do that with, because the last thing we'd want to do is alienate the community of people who write into us every week.
And also to them, 50,000 people sounds like nothing. If you're used to advertising on TV or something, you've got...
Well, hang
Millions
on a
watching
minute.
X Factor.
You look at the circulation of a magazine like the New Statesman, it's about 20,000, or the Spectator, which is about 70,000. I mean, you've got essentially the same kind of numbers
Yeah.
as a weekly or monthly magazine. Now, that's not to be sniffed at for advertisers.
No, but I suppose podcasting is much newer medium than magazines, and they're naturally suspicious of
Well,
that.
no, you are absolutely right. I mean, I found that on my blog, where you can get a lot of campaigning organisations advertising, but the sort of Mercedes, the Rolex, the people with all the money, they're very suspicious of things that they don't really understand.
No,
and
exactly.
I guess you fall into that.
They think it's all going to go away. It's just a passing fancy.
And also, I think they have still an attitude, even though we're kind of, 6-7 years into people doing this kind of thing, they still have an attitude that if they advertise on, say, ITV1, where they know that people almost passively sort of consume those adverts, they're going to hit huge numbers of them, and if 1 in 100 gets the ad, then that works. It's such a different mentality to us, where we're saying, well, we've got 100th of the audience, but all of the people listening to us have chosen to listen to us
over everything else on the internet.
That's right, yeah, which is actually...
And there's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there.
It's very diverting, the
But
internet.
do you not feel that podcasting's sort of a bit 2002?
I think...
Shame on you, Ian.
It is...
Did it even exist in 2002? I think the word wasn't coined
I think
yet.
it did.
I think it is slightly frightening when you realise how much the whole thing depends on Apple, because it really was iTunes that brought podcasts to people's attention because they were free. People got their Apple-branded music devices, plugged them in, it popped up, and at the same time it was asking them would they like to buy the new Lady Gaga album. It was saying, oh, and would you like to listen to Ricky Gervais saying funny things for free? And that was of massive appeal to people. And you do sometimes, when we're having dark panics, we do think, well, what if Apple suddenly decided one day, well, actually, we don't really like podcasts anymore. They are a bit, to be fair, 2006, let's say. So in that sense, there is this built-in thing of it's still so reliant. Over 90% of our audience comes through that. But on the other hand, I think people have got so used now to on-demand listening, using kind of radio players online and stuff, that podcast really is just part of that for people. They don't really make the distinction.
Isn't there a part of you, though, that thinks, well, actually, maybe I'd rather have 10,000 listeners and for them all to be paying 79 pence a week?
It does appeal. But
it would be nice to have 79 pence times 10,000 a week. However,
that would be £7,900 in case you hadn't worked it
I can
out.
move decimal points in just as well as the next man. Well, actually, the next man is Ollie, and he can't do them at all. The other week, he was trying to divide 10 million by 100, and he came up with 200,000.
Oh dear.
I think it is an appetising idea, but the even better idea is that we can get the largest possible audience for free who really, really like what we do, and then try and, horrible business word, but try and monetise that through other things, like this book, which is something that they'll go out and buy and actually enjoy and not feel cheated.
There's something in it for them. A book to read on the lavatory.
Exactly. This is the ultimate toilet book. That's the idea.
Or the penultimate one, in case we write a second volume.
Right, let's remind people why you've written this book. Let's ask you a couple more questions. Ollie, what is the point of a tie? I admit they make people look smart, but what is their function?
I can't remember.
The
book about ties.
Look in the index for ties, Ollie, quick. It was because before they invented shirts with buttons, they were keeping the neck shut. And then it just became a vogue. And somehow, actually, it stayed a fashionable item, even though it is uncomfortable, I should imagine, in many situations, a bit impractical.
Well, thank goodness for Helen. As a penance, Ollie, you get the next one too.
To be fair, we wrote the book separately, you see. So actually, Helen did write the entry on ties.
Did I? I don't
wrote the one
remember
on
it at
Boxing
all.
Day, that's
Right,
what
well,
I remember the Boxing Day one as well.
Yeah, but you've got a different memory.
If LBC Showbiz editor Jo Parkinson was here, she would be interested, and I'm sure she's listening, in the answer to this question.
Okay.
Why, at movie premieres, do stars walk down a red carpet?
Oh, now this I do remember.
Thank goodness for that.
It's something to do with a train from the 1920s, I think. I haven't got the book open in front of me and I can't remember the name of the train. But the phrase red carpet treatment existed as an idea before movie premieres wanted to look glamorous and top of the range. And the phrase red carpet treatment came from a luxurious train. If you travelled first class, you walked down a red carpet.
Well, if you have an original question, which Helen and Ollie won't have answered in their book, do give us a call, 0845 6060 973. Is there something that you've always wanted to know, but have never known how to find out the answer? Well, they probably won't know it either, but it's worth trying, isn't it? You can text us 84850, email ian@lbc.co.uk, or tweet me at lbc973. Now, here's one from Fiona. How does a poltergeist manifest, and why?
Don't people say that often it's... not that I really believe in poltergeists, having had no practical experience of one, But don't they say that it's often the energies of adolescents growing up in a house and creating this kind of destructive invisible force that knocks things off shelves?
That sounds like just propaganda.
If you've just made that up, that's very impressive.
I mean, someone made up poltergeist, so you can invent rules for what they're there for.
Now, here's one which really will test you. Why do you never see a dead bird dead from old age?
Oh, but you might do, and you just wouldn't know because it then gets hit by a car and you assume it's been run over.
And also, how can you tell that it's old? Because, I mean, they're covered in feathers. You can't tell whether they're going all wrinkly underneath.
Yeah, you can tell just by the colouring, can't you? They're a bit grey and sort of...
I do find that weird, how you can kind of... Because I've had pet cats my whole life, and how you can look back at pictures and somehow you know the cat looks young.
Yeah.
They look the same, but somehow you can see, oh yeah, he was young then. What is that? You just pick up the ageing process of felines in some weird way.
I think it's with I mean, all animals and all... I mean, it's just the same as humans. I mean, my dog is now 13, and I was looking at pictures of him when he was a puppy the other day, and you wouldn't think he was the same dog, because he's about 10 times the size, but bless him. Now, final one here for the moment. Andrew says, I think this is a question for me, why do you call West Ham and not West Beef or West Pork
Ba-boom.
or West Mutton?
Well, this is a question for you, really, isn't it? Because aren't you a West Ham fan?
Yeah, I am, but
So
unfortunately...
you must know the answer. What's the point of us? You don't know?
Well, it's just named after West Ham, the place. I don't know why the place West Ham... Maybe someone out there can tell us, because I don't know, and you clearly don't
Well, I
either.
can only assume it was
Cannot
west of a
for
place called Ham.
There is a place called Ham in southwest London, so it is plausible. But where is the team
Yeah,
West
but
Ham?
it's quite a long way away from West Ham, so that doesn't really work. We are in the company of Helen Zaltzman and Olly Mann, the authors of Answer Me This. Brand new book, out on Thursday. They tell me that it will make an ideal Christmas present for someone you don't like. If you've got a question for them, 0845 6060
84850 Ian Dale.
And it's the LBC Book Hour. Every Monday between 9 and 10 we'll be talking to some leading authors about their books. Might give you some good Christmas present ideas over the next few weeks. We're with Helen Zaltzman and Olly Mann, and I'll be going back to them in just a second. But before I do, I want to hear from Clive Ball, what's in his programme tonight. Hi, Clive.
Hi there. Yes, I'll be here at 10. And coming up at 10, amongst other things, what advice would you give to people who are trying to get a job? Coming into the job market, 18 or 21, all these graduates that record numbers are not being able to get a job. One unemployed teenager made the papers today because she went out with a sort of sandwich board saying, give me a job, and with the mobile phone number written underneath. I don't think it actually worked, but it's at least showing a bit of initiative. So I'd like to know how you got your job and what advice you'd have on how to get a job. Because there are many other ways other than just sort of applying for an interview, isn't there?
Well, I was saying I got an email earlier asking from someone asking me if I could give
For
them
a job.
one of my 3 jobs.
Ah, right, yes.
But I said no.
Yes. So we're going to talk about that. Also, we have the midterm elections in America. I just thought we maybe would have our own little midterm vote as well on President Obama, because I remember very well all the excitement. I was on the night that we finally had him sort of inaugurated, and even British voters who didn't have anything to do with the election were ringing in, and the sense of expectation and excitement was immense. But I'm not sure whether it still is. So that's what I'm going to try and test tonight. And one other thing, we're going to look at having children when you're older. There's a record increase in the number of women over 50 having babies. Is that advisable? And how do you feel about encouraging people to be older mums and dads?
I would say it's just plain wrong.
I think it's mad, but there you are.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to have the switchboard lit up on that one, and I've just started it off for you.
Right, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Clive. We'll see you at 10 o'clock. Now, we're with Helen Zaltzman and Olly Mann, the authors of Answer Me This, a new book from Faber and Faber. Remarkably cheap price of $9.99, I would say, but no doubt you can get it cheaper in a lot of different places.
Oh, I dare say.
It's quite a chunky, big book, not easily fit in a Christmas stocking, would you say?
Well, it's quite bendy, though. So you could fit it around the ankle, maybe not in the foot.
Well, for those who've just joined us, let's just explain in 30 seconds, Helen, what this book is all about.
We answer questions in a podcast called Answer Me This, and this book is a collation of some of our favourite questions from the last 4 years of the podcast Answer Me This.
And what is your favourite question?
That's the question that makes my mind go blank. It does change often. I'll tell you, my least favourite recent question is someone emailed in last week saying, my friend and I have been having an argument over who's got the best postcode. Mine is this and his is this. Which one's better?
And people really waste their time doing that, do they?
They do, but then
Lives have been lost.
for every one of those, you do get a question, like one that's in the book, which is one of my personal favourites, which is, why is it lion tamers use chairs? And I never thought about that. I like the ones that make you suddenly think, oh, yeah, think about your cliched image of a lion tamer.
I'm not sure I've got one.
You haven't got a cliched image of a lion tamer, but you're a sophisticated man about town, Ian
I've
Dale.
never thought about a lion tamer. Why would I?
Well,
In case
I
you
shall-
ever needed one's services, if your house is being assaulted by a lion.
I shall tell you that most people listening in, I reckon, if you said the word lion tamer and got them to draw a little picture of a lion tamer, they'd be holding a chair. And the reason is, the biological theory is, that lions are programmed to hone in on a lone animal. And having 4 legs waved at them kind of confuses them.
Although they're not confused when a zebra waves 4 legs at them, they go
They
right in
eat
for
it.
the kill. Actually, I realise now, Ian, I like it when people send in their emotional problems to me, because I like to feed off their misery. And I like it when we get questions like this one we had from a 17-year-old asking whether he should have an affair with his 40-year-old married neighbour.
Yeah, that was a good.
Really? You see,
Yeah.
I'd like those.
Yeah, I relish those. I'm always fancied myself an agony aunt, and this way, through the podcast, I don't really have the responsibility
I
for the
could build
fallout.
a whole hour's phone-in on that.
It'd be a joy. Well, what do you think? I mean, in the end, he didn't, because she sent him some nude pictures of herself, and he found them
no.
undesirable.
No,
But-
love.
I think he shouldn't have anyway, because person next door, it's going to go wrong.
I think keep at a further distance away
Sorry,
than
hang
through
on a
bricks and
second.
mortar.
She lived next door to him and then sent him pictures.
Yes, this is the modern way, Ian, texting pictures. I know in the olden days they would have made a little hole in the wall like Pyramus and Thisbe and whispered poetry to each other through it. Now, texting rude pictures while her husband's not looking.
Just lifted her petticoat, wouldn't she, in the old days, while she was hanging up the laundry?
We're going to go to Gareth in Edgware. Hello, Gareth.
Good evening.
Now, you have a question for Helen and Ollie. Fire away.
Yes, Helen and Olly, good evening to you.
Good evening,
Good evening,
Gareth.
Gareth. How are you doing?
I'm doing fabulous. So here's my question. Mm-hmm. What do the French say when they have déjà vu?
They say that phrase that they invented, déjà vu, because we borrowed it because we didn't have a word for the concept. Like we borrowed Jolie Laide and savoir-faire, and they borrowed le weekend, because the language has these deficiencies that foreign words patch up.
So they actually really do say that, then?
Probably. Although, in reality, they probably just shrug their shoulders and go on strike. That's what you want to know, isn't it? That's what you really think.
Now he's
Now,
coming out. isn't
Gareth, were you hoping for a more complicated answer than that?
I was looking for a more interesting answer than that.
it? Oh, no, sorry.
Sometimes the truth is not
It's
as interesting as the
dull.
We
fiction.
often get asked questions about phrases, and, the origin's often obscure, and that's disappointing to
Well,
everybody.
keep your questions coming. Thank you, Gareth, for yours.
Sorry to
Gareth.
disappoint, Gareth.
0845 6060 973, text 84850. You can email ian@lbc.co.uk. Now, Sue in Hornchurch has been very kind in telling me that regarding the West Ham question that we had before the news, it's to do with Hamlets, and I think Ollie's got some more information on that.
Yes, West Hammer, the word, is from 1186. It's from the Old English ham, and it means a dry area of land between rivers or marshland. So yeah, Hamlet does sound about
That's
right.
embarrassing, because I've got a degree in Old English, and I didn't clock it.
And you've got a degree in Old English.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was really thinking about the jobs market at the time.
Yeah, it was vocational.
What, Old English language?
Yeah, and literature.
Go on, give us a bit.
Well, I wasn't really fluent in speaking it, given that it's
Oh.
been dead
She's
for
lying. She
1,000
can.
years.
Go on, do a line of poetry. Do a bit of The Wanderer or something.
Oh god, all I can really remember it now. It wasn't the most useful to us. And Björknoth in his offermode. And oh god, what's the next line? It's something about conceding too much ground to the enemy.
The thing about Old English, Ian, is that it's the equivalent of someone pouring through our emails, our most facile emails about what time we're coming to the studio and what you're having for dinner in 2,000 years' time.
How can you say that?
It's not proper literature. Not like our book, Answer Me This.
No.
which
all
would
these funny
clearly be-
riddles about onions.
It's just documents that happen to have survived.
Well, I want to thank Valerie from Dagenham Village, who says Ham is short for Hamlet, i.e. village. So West Ham is the western village, while East Ham is the Eastern Village. And what about Ham? There's a Ham, isn't there, near Richmond?
Yeah, well, that's just
That's
the
just
village.
that's just a village.
That's the village to which all others must match up.
Well, indeed. Let's talk a little bit about the fact that you are essentially creations of the new media. I mean, you started with your podcast, but now you're going back to, I don't know whether you would describe radio as old media, but
It's older.
you appear quite a lot on various radio stations, including LBC. I know you've been doing the papers with Nick Ferrari and
We have, yeah.
Steve Allen.
Steve
I
Allen,
think.
that's
You've
a
done
laugh.
Ken Livingstone, have you done him?
We have, yes.
You see, you're tarting yourself all over the schedule, aren't
I was
you?
on with Petri Hoskin as well.
Well, there we go.
Lovely.
But it
time.
always means more when we're with you, Ian.
Well, thank you very much. But you're also publishing in old book form. Is there an e-book version of this? Because
There
if there
will be,
isn't,
yes.
there really ought to be.
There is going to be an e-book. There's not going to be an audiobook. People were asking us that. We thought that would be too weird, to
That's
take a
just
podcast,
silly.
turn it into a book, and then read it into an audiobook.
It would be sort of Ollie and Helen's greatest hits, I suppose.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
exactly. But yes, no, there is going to be an e-book. I suppose it's not just us, actually. There's a couple of books based on Twitter feeds that are coming out this Christmas as well. Cheryl Curl, have you seen
You're
this?
kidding me.
Written in
How
phonetic
can you
Cheryl Curly.
possibly write a book about Twitter feeds?
Well, I think what they've done is they've kind of taken
Mind you,
the
it's given me an idea.
Cha-ching!
Ian Dale's 365 Days of Tweets calendar.
Yeah.
That could work.
I
A
think
few
it
years
could.
ago, Ollie wrote a play based on blogs. And
I
probably
do-
at the
I thought
time,
it was
people
retro.
would have thought that couldn't be done.
But there is. I mean, to be serious for a second, there is this conflict in a sense between the old media and the new media, where a lot of people think, well, never the twain shall meet, and a lot of people accuse me of selling out when I started doing radio programs. They said, well, you're new media, why would you do that? I'm thinking, well, I actually did radio, TV stuff before I ever blogged, so I've never seen the conflict, but a lot of people do.
I don't think there is one. I think, well, especially if you are working in new media, you need any work you can get.
Yeah, and this is it's a strange thing, isn't it? Is that new media takes a lot of the audience away from newspapers and TV and radio, but then at the same time, the people who are doing that then need to work in newspapers, TV, and radio to make some money. So everyone's kind of in the same boat ultimately.
But it's supplementary. I would read your blog because I was interested in what your opinion was, and I'd probably
Well,
read
you've
a
made
newspaper.
clear you don't read my blog, and you don't care
If
what
I
my
were
opinion
interested in
is.
what your opinion was.
She's
No, but
used the word
blogs
would
generally. You know, to round out my current affairs knowledge, which obviously without me reading your blog is minimal. But it's not replacing newspapers, it's just extra.
I also think, the fact that we're on the same platform when you go to iTunes, in the podcast chart, and now when you go to a bookshop and you go to the humour section, as these kind of big household names, I think that's had an effect as well. And I think that's why, it's an open secret that all of Rupert Murdoch's new developments focus around the iPad. It's clear that on both sides, old media and new media, there's an understanding that if in the audience's eyes you're getting the numbers, then it doesn't really matter how you start it.
Now, talking of charts, apparently you wanted to conquer the Luxembourg charts.
Ah, yes.
Retro pranks.
This is when, first of all, we didn't really... We kind of got the biggest audience we felt we could at the time, which was... How many people were listening? Perhaps about 8,000 a week or something?
I think it was about 4,000, and we got to number 21 in the UK iTunes chart after about doing the podcast for, say, 10 months. And we couldn't get into the top 20 because it was full of BBC and Channel 4. And so we discovered that the world's smallest iTunes store was Luxembourg.
Which is for tax reasons, because iTunes is based in Luxembourg,
Yeah, it's
as are
just-
all of these companies, by the way, Amazon and everyone.
They've just got a letterbox in Luxembourg.
But for this reason, they have an iTunes store just for the people of Luxembourg.
Bless.
And so we went there.
So we went there to crack the Luxembourg
You
chart.
went to Luxembourg?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a small
Did you?
place. We thought we could just spend a day there. We gave out flyers with free biscuits attached. We went on breakfast radio. My boyfriend, who does our jingles, busked the jingles in the street, which is not popular at all in Luxembourg. They're very serious in
Bureaucrats are not
Luxembourg
renowned
City.
for their humour.
But he made €5 from a drunken German exchange student who just stood in the street dancing
And we got to number
3.
number 3 ultimately. Yeah.
within a
really?
couple of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
That's how small Luxembourg is.
And it had a knock-on effect around the other iTunes chart. So that was kind of, that was our
So I
first
think if you
big
did that in
success.
Tunbridge Wells, you'd probably go down quite well.
What, let's crack Tunbridge Wells.
Yeah.
Tunbridge Wells doesn't have its own iTunes store yet,
It
but I'm
could
sure,
do,
I'm
though.
sure
It-
many of the
it
citizens of
could
Tunbridge
do.
Wells would want it to.
Wait, Tunbridge Wells trying to devolve from the rest of Britain.
You don't joke. I'm with Helen Zaltzman and Olly Mann. They are the authors of the Answer Me This book, and also, can you author a podcast? What do you do? what's the word I should use? You are the
Progenitor?
creators, the creators of the Answer Me This podcast, which you can download on iTunes if you've been fascinated with what they've been saying for the last 45 minutes. And if you haven't, then don't. It's 10:45. Time for travel with Alan Carroll.
Live Bull and have your say tonight from 10, LBC 97.3.
And it's the LBC Book Club. We're going to be opening the book club every Monday between 9 and 10. I'm going to be inviting some really top-notch authors onto the programme over the next few weeks. On Monday, November the 15th, Jeffrey Archer will be here to talk about his new book of short stories, And Thereby Hangs a Tale. We're also going to be joined at some point in the near future by Peter Mandelson, who will be talking about his autobiography, The Third Man, which I've actually just finished reading, and I have to say, it is a brilliant read.
Is it?
It is. It's just authentically him. Now, that might put some people off, but it really does tell a good tale. Giles Brandreth will be here on December the 6th.
There's a theme running through these authors I can't help
Is there?
noticing.
What?
It's a slight politics theme, possibly?
No. What? I've got you lot here.
That's
You're
true.
not
That's an
political, are you?
aberration, though.
No, I don't actually want it to be all about... I mean, I love reading political books, but I do want to get people outside politics. So... we're going to hopefully have one or two authors every week who'll tell us about their books. And also I want LBC listeners to phone in their questions as well, because I don't pretend I'm the font of all knowledge about asking questions. But that's, of course, what you're here to do, to answer questions,
Yes.
isn't it?
I should say, when Jeffrey Archer comes on, ask him about that thing when he writes a book, he goes and locks himself away, apparently.
A lot of authors do that. Andrew Roberts, I think, when he writes his books, he just goes to France in a cottage for 6 weeks and just writes non-stop for 6 weeks. I don't know how you can do that.
I think that would just drive me absolutely mental, actually. It's fine for a day to go in a library, but...
Now, Ollie, for those who've just joined us, remind us what your book is about.
Yeah, our book is a hard-hitting memoir of growing up in Russia. No, it's not. It's a collection of questions and answers, stocking filler, toilet book for Christmas. It's called Answer Me This, and it's the funniest, our favourite questions from the 4 years that we've been doing our podcast of the same name.
And it's a bit like James O'Brien's Mystery Hour, we should say that, just to give it a little bit of a plug, which is on Thursdays. I'm asking my producer to remind me of the time, but...
How
anyway,
ironic
it's on
that
Thursday,
you need
it's
to
on
ask a
Thursdays
question
anyway.
about James O'Brien's Mystery
Indeed.
Hour.
Right, now here's a text from a listener. What is another word... This is from Zach. What is another word for thesaurus?
Oh, did you get that question off the internet, Zach? Because we get that a lot, along with, why is dyslexia so hard to spell?
So you'll know the answer then, Helen.
I have got a book that is essentially a thesaurus, but by a different name, and it is called The Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms.
Good point.
You can see why thesaurus caught on, though, can't you?
It is quicker to say.
Quick, it's still a long word, though. I reckon it'll get abbreviated for the 21st century child soon.
Have you ever had a question which you just couldn't answer? Either humorously or at all?
Oh, well, we get very serious ones. We get some where we think, crikey, why are they writing to us? They should have written to the Samaritans. And actually, often we do refer people. I mean, people who are in serious trouble. But then you do
Really?
think, yeah, but it's because I think they have a connection with us and think that because we can answer silly, funny questions that we can help them with their personal things. We get some of those.
I find the question that we get asked loads that I can't answer because I can't even be bothered to think about it is which cinema armrest is yours?
Yeah, we do get that a lot.
I feel people need to sort this out on
I
a
think
case-by-case
it's the one on
basis.
the right.
It depends. I lean
But if
to
I
the
was left-handed, I might say it was the one on the left.
We
I'm
all
not
know you lean to the right,
left-handed.
Ian, but not everyone
Hey.
does, you see.
Bum bum. Yes.
I like to take up both of them.
Swiftly moving on. Do you both have jobs?
No,
Are you saying this is not a job, Ian?
yeah, we've
Fair
somehow
enough.
managed to make this almost a job.
How you can't? You say you don't make money out of the podcast, so you must have some means of earning a living.
We do make a very small amount of money out of the podcast.
So it's all coming out
We've
now.
got paid
No,
for the
really,
book.
a ridiculously small amount of money out of the podcast that covers the cost of us doing the podcast. And yeah, spin-off stuff. You know, we do radio and telly and writing
Yeah.
the book, yeah.
But before this year, I was a freelancer in the publishing industry, which I gather you dabble in, Ian.
From time to time.
Doing indexing, proofreading, that kind of thing.
But you've given that up now.
Well, we've been able to for the last year, but I mean, we're realistic about the fact
But that's
that...
brilliant.
I
that
missed
you can
that
actually not do any work and do your hobby as your job.
Exactly. I mean, that really takes the fun out of it. But yeah, it is amazing that this has sustained us all year. And,
Do you feel
just something-
sometimes, like with your blog, do you feel like political bitchery has become your job?
Political what? Obituaries.
I said bitchery.
clearly you don't read my blog. It's
no, you're very kind. You're very
high-minded.
kind. I know you're no Guido Fawkes. I know that.
No.
But nonetheless, you must have taken a bit more glee in it when you weren't thinking, actually, lots of other things hang off this. I think we've become more responsible broadcasters, weirdly.
I understand what you're saying, because when you realise that you've got all of these readers or listeners, it does slightly take the edge off,
Yeah.
because I used to do a lot of gossipy stuff on my blog,
Yeah, that's
which
what I mean.
wouldn't dream of doing now.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Because in the end, when I was talking about John Prescott's private parts, I thought, do I really want to go there again?
No one wants to go there.
No, that is indeed very true.
Except for an inexplicable number of
How
mistresses.
do you follow this book up? Because I suppose you could just do one every year now, couldn't you? You could make it become an annual.
That would be nice if the commissioning editor of Faber's listening. Ian Dale thinks we should do one a year.
Well, I mean, it is a perfect toilet book, isn't it? I mean, I don't say that in a disparaging way.
No.
but
It's meant to be read in
it's
short
not a book
verse.
that you would read cover to cover,
No,
is
you
it? Let's
shouldn't.
put it that
It
way.
would just get irritating if you read too much of it. But 5 minutes.
It's one for the
Every
library.
Lubery.
Oh, I've never heard that word before. Did you just create that?
No, it's Helen's word.
But I got it off a man when I worked in the antiquarian bookshop in Tunbridge Wells, Ian. A
What,
man came in.
Halls?
Halls.
I
Man came
love
in.
that shop. It's
You should.
very expensive, but
Is it now?
It's good browse.
It used to be cheap as, but everyone's got to make a living in tough times.
They use that a lot for filming programs, don't they? Like sort of oldie worldy programs.
Well, they used it to film the J.R. Hartley Yellow Pages advert.
Did they?
Yes, not
That's-
all of them. There were lots of different bookshops, but it was one of them.
Helen, I can't believe Helen's talked about the antiquarian bookshop in Tunbridge Wells that she worked at in her gap year
I have
numerous
told
times.
you. I have told
She's
you.
never
just
mentioned
weren't
that. No,
listening.
you've never mentioned they filmed a classic advert there.
Not all of it.
What's we're sort of moving towards the end of the hour now. What does the future hold for both of you? What would you ideally like to do apart from oust me from this chair on LBC 97.3?
Well, that is one of the things. We've always wanted a radio show, and our approach to that was, hey, let's try making our own show on the internet. So that's one thing that we've kind of always wanted, and it's kind of persuading people who run these sorts of stations that you can start online and work your way up to that.
Have you never thought about doing internet radio? Because that would seem to me to be the logical next step for you from this, where you actually do it live.
Well, if you think podcasting is a bit 2002, Ian, I think internet radio kind of has that shade of old-fashionedness because podcasting chimes in with people wanting things on demand now and being able to take them away and listen to them wherever in a kind of neat chunk. I don't really know anyone that listens to internet radio.
Yeah, I also think with the new 3G chips that you're going to get inside, Ford have announced that all their new cars.
You
Wasn't it?
don't like that idea.
Of course, you wouldn't choose to. You'd choose
No,
to listen to your show first.
Enough of that. Now, let's have another couple of questions before we finish the programme. This is a good one. Do you two ever fall out with each other?
Yeah, we kind of niggle at each other.
Yeah, it's because we spend too much time together.
Yeah.
I mean, after a while, we just can't even just bear to be in the same room as each other, but it goes away again.
Yeah.
We
We're
get
best
on
friends,
fine.
really. There's no one
Yeah.
else I'd rather be doing all this stuff with than Helen, but
You're so
inevitably
sweet.
we get on each other's nerves.
Now, why do shops offering key cutting services invariably also offer shoe repair services? Because the two don't seem to me to go together.
Well, I went up to my local shoe repair and key cutter to ask this very question, and he said, "Oh, they were talking about this on James O'Brien's Mystery Hour the other day." He really did. And then he said, "Well, they got the answer wrong, though. What it actually is, I can't remember what the wrong answer was. Because what would the point of that be?" But he said what happens was, once cheap shoe shops came in offering shoes that for 20 odd quid that were made out of plastic, people didn't bother having them repaired. They just threw them away. So they had to get some other thing that would fit into their shop with not too much machinery to keep them afloat. So key cutting machinery is pretty small, and that's how it came about, and that's why they've got all these dog tags and pen knives as well.
So lesson about capitalism there. It's everything you need to know about the modern height. You don't need Mary
Adapt
Queen
to
of
survive.
Shops. That anecdote has everything you need to know
Well-
about modern day consumerism.
It's been great to talk to you both. Good
It's
luck
been a
with
pleasure,
the
Ian.
book.
Thank
The
you.
book is called Answer Me This. It's by Helen Zaltzman. I keep saying Zaltzman. You say Zaltzman. I say, yeah.
Let's
go
cut the
with
whole
the-
thing
And,
off.
and indeed. And Olly Mann. It's $9.99. It's published by Faber and Faber. It's in paperback, but quite a big chunky paperback.
Yes.
And
Trade paperback, they call it.
I think, I really do think that this book will do very well. It's very nicely set out. So
Thank you.
It's lovely font, isn't it, inside? Garamond.
it's a lovely font.
And it's got some good gags in it.
It's got some. That's enough. That's enough.
It really has.
Well,